Okay, it's Sunday, which means against my better judgment, it's time to go to Reddit and see what we can find in this hive of scum and villainy. So I've been to the Overwatch University subreddit ahead of time and just scraped all the questions off the first gold page, so I'm going to answer them now. Some footage of Dragon Ball FighterZ plays in the background, because it's a better game than Overwatch. And if you're wondering which side I'm on, please just pretend whichever side won was the side I was on. I would direly love to have a controller so that I can play it again, but well, you know, when you live in Canada, a fucking controller costs you $80. Do I look like I have $80? I ain't got no fucking $80. Anyway, also I'm still sick. I apologize for the lack of consistent uploads the past week. Being sick does that. So, yes. Anyway, now, starting. When is Zenyatta a viable pick? So the problem with Zenyatta is mostly, well, there's two things. First and foremost is that he doesn't do a lot of healing. So he kind of needs to be played in combination with someone that can do a lot of healing, right? Now you need to play him with, like, sorry, some real nonsense was happening on screen. He needs to be played with someone that does big healing. So, like, you can't play him with Mercy. Mercy's not a very good main healer, just for the record, but you can't really play him with Mercy. There's not enough healing. So it needs to be, like, Ana, Baptiste, or Moira. You know, the main healers, basically. The problem with playing Zenyatta with Ana is that you're both extremely vulnerable supports. And unless the Ana's really good, both will get bullied really easily by the bad men. So that one, Ana, I find, is like one of the most commonly played supports, so not being able to be played with Ana or Zen, you know, reliably is already pretty bad. He's okay with Bap, but the problem is that neither of you can, like, peel for each other. The best you've got is Baptiste's, Immortality Field. So more often than not, Baptiste will just, like, leave you if something bad starts happening, because at least he can use his powerful knees and jump away from danger. Zenyatta has no such luck. And then Zen with Moira is okay, it's just kind of not as good as other combinations of healers, basically. And then the other problem that Zen has is that he is very vulnerable. So, it's a shame that he doesn't, like, do a lot of healing, because, like, Bridget would be, like, the best one you could play him with, but it's not really consistent enough healing, unfortunately. We used to do Zenyatta and Lucio a lot back in the olden times, the before days, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But it's, you know, it was with dive comps, and, like, dive comps haven't really been a thing for some time at this point. They still aren't really right now. I had foretold they would be. I was mistaken, you know, but Ryan and Zen have been a lot more popular, or Ryan and Zarya have been a lot more popular, rather, which is I'm all about. Anyway. What was I saying? Yeah, so Zen has got a lot of problems, basically. Now, you can play Zen, by all means. I don't think Zen is unviable. You will struggle as you climb higher. This is the case with all picks that are not, like, A or S tier characters, basically. It'll get harder as you climb, but I think you can play Zen. The problem is just that, like, depending on how aggressive the enemy team is and which healer you're playing him with, it can be a real struggle. Just because Zen doesn't do a lot of healing, doesn't do a lot of peeling, does do a lot of damage, does help with the damage front. So if your team is, like, bad at doing damage, you know, that's cool. Zen's nice then. He's also got one of the only defensive ults in the game, which is important sometimes. Like, sometimes you just need a defensive ultimate to counter, like, Dragon Blade, Graviton, you know? In which case, Zen is fair enough. I find Transcendence is generally better than Sound Barrier, as far as the defensive ultimates go, but there are some things that Trance will not save you from that the Sound Barrier would save you from, like Deadeye, Pulse Bomb, Self-Destruct, you know. Sound Barrier can save you from them. Trance, no, you fucking die. Bastion ult as well, but yeah, so, you know, if you, basically, like, you kind of have to want to play Zenyatta in a lot of situations for Zenyatta to be worth picking. And if you want to play Zenyatta, by all means, dude, fucking play whatever. You don't need to worry about whether or not Zenyatta is a 100% meta-endorsed hero, unless you're in, like, Masters. So, for 90... What's Masters? It's like top 3% of the player base or something like that. If you're in, like, 95-ish% of the player base, you can play Zen. It'll be fine. So, there you go. So next up is, how do I play Sigma without Orisa? So Sigma only really works when you play him with Orisa or Reinhardt. He is not really a main tank, so this already limits his options, because that means you can't really play him with the other off tanks without it being difficult, at least. And he doesn't really play particularly well with Hammond or Winston, because, I mean, an anchor tank. This guy is fucking blocking this Krillin. What an absolute... I've just been watching this guy block for, like, 40 seconds. What a guy. I got hit, like, 5 times. Alright, he got hit in the end. What a champion. Holy shit. Anyway, so, yeah, he doesn't really play well with Winston and Hammond because he doesn't really bring a lot to help them, which is, when you're playing the off tank, you're generally trying to help facilitate the main tank, basically, and he's not gonna facilitate a dive tank particularly well, so that only really leaves Reinhardt and Orisa that he can reasonably be played with, and that's kind of the long and short of it, basically. Like, he's only really good with the other barrier tanks, so if you aren't playing with a Reinhardt or an Orisa, I encourage you to pick a different tank, basically. Yeah, and I mean, the question is, how do you play him without Orisa? You play him with Reinhardt the exact same way you would play with Orisa, basically. Like, nothing really changes as far as playstyle goes between those two heroes. You're doing the same things. It's just, those are really the only situations that Sigma really thrives in, so I encourage you to not pick him unless you are in one of those situations. There you go. So, next up is D.Va just a throw pick? No, we already covered this a little bit with the Zenyatta one, where I don't think anybody is completely unviable to play, because at the end of the day, skill with hero is greater than all other aspects of the hero pick. Which I didn't say earlier, but that's always been my firm belief. It is way more important you pick a hero that you know how to play than anything else. Doesn't matter if it's better for your composition versus the enemy composition, meta tier list wise, doesn't matter. If you know how to play this hero better than the hero that would be a better pick meta wise, pick that hero that you know how to play, because you knowing how to play the hero is the most important aspect. So here's the problem with D.Va, is that she's really good at feeding ult charge, basically. And the other issue is, a lot of the currently popular DPS, D.Va brings very little to fighting. Because you see a lot of Reaper, Mei, Symmetra, and not just DPS as well, because you'll also see, like, a lot of Zarya right now as well. You see a lot of Mei, you know. You see a lot of Doomfist. D.Va doesn't bring a lot to fighting these people. Like, you can eat Mei's ultimate, you can Defense Matrix at least some of Death Blossom. You know, you can eat Grav, this is all cool. This has always been, like, D.Va's main thing. She can eat ultimates, right? She completely no-sells a bunch of ultimates, Barrage. The problem is just that a lot of these characters that are popular right now bully D.Va around, and she feeds a lot of ult charge, which is never, like, good. This has always been the case for D.Va. She's always been very good at feeding ult, but, like, she's been nerfed a few. Like, she used to have a lot more upside than she does right now. Basically, like, right after, Defense Matrix got its first change, it was, like, mad strong, and she could basically be played as a main tank, because you just had that much Defense Matrix to use. No longer the case. So, D.Va brings significantly less upside right now. So, D.Va is still good in, like, certain situations. Like, if you need to counter a Pharah, I'll play D.Va as, like, by choice, because D.Va is good at countering the Pharah. You get in her face, you bully her around, eat the shots, eat the barrage. Like, D.Va is a good tank to play against Pharah. You know, don't, like, destroy your team composition to do it. If you were playing Rein Roadhog previously, don't suddenly change to D.Va Roadhog just to counter the Pharah, you know? Like, do use some discretion still, but, like, if team comp permits, D.Va is good to play against Pharah. D.Va is good to play if you gotta, like, if you're really worried about specific ultimates killing your team, like Graviton, Deadeye, Barrage, May's ultimate, I guess, you know, Death Blossom. D.Va's still good at countering these things, because Defense Matrix just completely fucks them, so, those are good situations to pick her in still. She works well with the dive comp. This has always been true, this remains true. If you're running a dive comp, you can pick D.Va more or less freely. Yeah, like, that's the thing, is it needs to be, like, those kinds of situations, because outside of, like, playing a dive comp or countering certain heroes, D.Va just doesn't bring as much as other tanks do. So, again, like, unless you're picking D.Va for those specific reasons, you basically need to want to pick D.Va, which, again, by all means, if you just want to pick D.Va, fucking go for it, dude. Far be it from me to stop you. We're playing a fucking video game. Have some fun playing the video game. And again, unless you're in, like, Masters, you don't really need to worry about any, like, tier list meta bullshit, because you'll be fine outside of very, very high SRs. So, yeah, there you go. She's not a throw pick, but you are encouraged to pick different heroes, unless you're in situations which D.Va is specifically strong. So, next up is, what should I do in a team fight as Lucio? So, you've got a few things you can do. You should be trying to peel for your other support as much as you can. Because Lucio is a good character for peeling, because you've got the boop and you've got speed boost, which is an underappreciated aspect of peeling for your team. Suppose you're playing Lucio with an Ana. Ana versus Doomfist, extremely sad, because Doomfist uses his ultimate, Ana's going to die. Unless Doomfist fucks up, basically. But if you're playing Lucio and you have Amp It Up, you can amp up Ana after Doomfist uses his ultimate, and Ana now probably actually survives Doomfist ultimate, because amp up speed boost is a fucking lot of speed. So you can help peel for Ana like that as well as, like, booping people off the supports. The other support. Peel for the other DPS as well, you know. Like, DPS generally don't have to worry about it so much. Like, if you're playing with, like, a Mei, you don't need to peel for Mei. Unless, like, she got flashbanged. You can boop the McCree to save her, you know, stuff like that. You generally don't really have to worry about the DPS, but, you know, pay that in attention as well. Try to save your ultimate to counter other enemy ultimates unless you have a specific plan, which is basically you're coordinating your engage with your teammates. Because those are the only real two uses for Sound Barrier, is countering other ultimates and engaging with your team. Now, you need to be coordinating with your team somewhat to get benefit out of engaging with the Sound Barrier, so it is generally safer to just save to counter other ultimates. Since it is one of the only defensive ultimates in the game. Try to boop enemy tanks, and well, not just enemy tanks, try to boop any enemy out of position, but the best people to boop out of position are generally tanks and supports. If you boop, like, the enemy Toes or Ana into your team, they're fucking dead, you know. Don't boop people just for the sake of it, which Lucio players fucking love to do. Because that generally will result in you saving the person you booped more than it will result in you killing the person you booped. Generally, Lucio players are just like, alright, I've gone up, I have left-clicked, meleeed, time to do the boop. The boop adds extremely little damage, and will generally boop the person out of danger more often than anything else. Like, the amount of times I have been mad at Lucio players for booping someone for the sake of it far outweighs the amount of times I've been like, hey, he killed that person because he booped them. Don't boop people for the sake of it. Try and have a purpose for why you're booping them, which is pushing them out of position or peeling for a teammate. Unless, like, you know, sometimes, like, Genji's using Deflect in front of you and he's got 5 health. You know, by all means, boop the guy to kill him, because it goes through Deflect, you know. But don't boop people just for the sake of booping them. Just always be shooting people. A lot of Lucio players, when they get, like, caught up in the swing of things, they stop shooting. Because they're kind of focusing on, like, wall riding or booping or whatever. Or just, like, pretending they're playing Stanky and they're just, like, smashing the shift key constantly, you know? Like, be shooting people, even if it's just shooting into a barrier, you know? It's something. Be doing something with your weapon. Surprisingly common issue I've observed. And those are, like, the big things for Lucio, really. And, like, be careful how you use Amp It Up, because you can use Amp It Up, like, way too soon and end up healing a bunch of people who are at full health, which is bad. Don't do that. So if you're using it early, you're usually using it for the speed boost rather than the heal, because early on in a fight, people are probably healthy. So you'll be better off on average speed boosting them into position to do something with their health. Or just save Amp It Up to use for healing, because it is a pretty big burst AoE heal overall, but if you use it too early during a team fight, it's not going to do any healing at all, or very minimal healing at the very least. So, try to be careful how you use Amp It Up. Don't just use it for the sake of it either. Lucio players do that pretty frequently as well. Don't just Amp It Up for the sake of it. Be conscious of why you're using this ability. It is a very important cooldown. Don't use it frivolously. And those are the big things, really, like, as far as playing Lucio in a teamfight goes. So, next up is what decides how much SR you gain. If you're below Diamond, your stats are taken into account with how much SR you gain or lose. This is why people have generally bemoaned, like, the system favors DPS because they have more stats that they can have high, and therefore they've got more ways they can please the system. This, in practice, makes extremely little difference, because most people are not... Like, for you to be in a position where you could game this SR system by playing DPS... You need to be way better than the SR you're currently in to actually, like, benefit from gaming the system like this. So, most people are not going to be bothered about this. I've seen, like, back in the olden times, I used to see threads occasionally that were like, this guy's got a negative win ratio, but he's still climbing because he's playing Bastion and just wrecking the DPS charts and therefore gaining more SR than he's losing on average. Like, this affected approximately 0.01% of people, and people worry about this too much. So anyway, the question. Below Diamond, your stats are taken into account for how much SR you gain and lose, but after Diamond, it stops caring and it just flattens it out. The other thing that will majorly affect your SR gains and losses is if the system thinks you are in the wrong SR. Like, if it thinks you are lower or higher than you should be currently, it will give you massive gains or losses to try and get you where you should be. So, for example, I've seen this many times myself, where I would get to Masters and then be a lazy bum. I would decay down to Diamond, like 3,000 exactly. I should probably play the video game again. And then for the next few games, I would be gaining 50 SR per match and losing like 5, because the system goes, why is this guy with the Masters MMR in Diamond? We should probably fix this, you know. And it'll do that in reverse as well if you are... This almost never happens. It's very hard to end up in an SR that's too high for you unless somebody boosted you. But if you are, like, Bronze MMR and you've ended up in Plat, you're going to be seeing the reverse of that, where you gain, like, 5 and lose, like, 50, until it gets you in place. But those are the only things that really affect it. The person that posted this was like, this is something that people also worry about a lot, like, you know, why do I only gain and lose like 20-ish SR, but when I watch a pro do a bronze to GM climb, which this person specifically said in this thread as well, why do they gain like 50 plus SR per match when I'm only gaining 20 or 50? It's because the system knows they're in the wrong SR. Like, they are looking at this person play and they go, these stats are way too fucking high, and this person wins extremely consistently, they are clearly too low for their SR, and so it starts bumping them to where they should be as quickly as it can. That's why you'll watch when somebody's doing a bronze to GM climb, they'll climb a lot faster than you. It's because the system knows. It sees them playing and goes, a bronze player is not going to rack this kind of win rate up or these kinds of stats up, and it accelerates them. So there you go. So next up is, if teammates are staggering, should you just attack one man down? This is one of those questions that doesn't have any good answer, really, because ideally you always fight 6v6, right? Or in your favor, if the numbers don't line up, right? You're always either fighting even or in your favor. But sometimes, like, you'll see this pretty regularly, where someone's just constantly getting picked off. And this puts you in a situation where, like, you want to wait for them so that you can fight 6v6, but if you wait too long, you might end up being down more people, because more people are getting picked off while you're waiting for this one person to get back. So then it ends up being even worse, because you waited for this guy, when it could have been a 5v6, now it's like 3 or 4v6, right? So it's one of those things where, like, sometimes you'll end up in games where this is, like, really a problem, and there's, like, no good solution for it, really. The best thing you can do is, like, try and worry about tempo more than, like, the numbers necessarily, because there are plenty of situations where you can be a man down, but still actually have a tempo advantage, because, like, somebody's out of position, so you can just collapse on, like, their tank really quickly. Somebody on their team just got picked off, and the person there, so it's now 5v5, and they've lost somebody massively more important than you lost, like, they lost their main tank or their main healer, you only lost, like, an off tank or healer, or just a DPS, you know? So you can end up in positions where, like, tempo is still in your favor, even though you're down this person. But, like, yeah, sometimes it's gonna be really hard where you have to play if your teammates are just constantly getting picked off, like, you feel like you can never get a full 6v6 going, you are generally gonna be better off just going in 5v6, because you don't want to spend the entire match waiting for people, and then you only get in, like, 2 actual fights, right? Because you'll see this happen sometimes as well. It's not as common as people would have you believe, but it'll happen sometimes, where you spend so long waiting for your teammates to group up that over the course of, like, 4 minutes, you only really had 2 actual pushes over that entire time, and this is not a good idea to do, because you'll only get 2 real pushes in. Like, suppose you only get 2 real pushes in, chances are the enemy team had full ults both times that oh, I know this guy, actually. Chances are they had all their ultimates, because you took so long to get this engage going, so you finally got your team fight in, and they had huge ult advantage, so they beat you anyway, now that you finally grouped up, right? So you don't want to do that. Like, if it really is just, like, constantly somebody's getting picked off, like, you can never get all 6 people together, try to do something rather than just spending 4 minutes doing nothing, because that only benefits the enemy team, you doing all of that waiting. But, you know, it's one of those things where, like, no solution is good when you're in that kind of situation. You're either fighting a person down a lot, or you're spending so much time waiting, you might as well have just gone for it, because they just had 6 ults anyway. So, life is hard sometimes. Like, for the most part, like, in those kinds of games where your teammates really are just constantly staggered and you can never get a 6v6 going, you're kind of just allowed to go, it probably wasn't meant to be this game. It's not that common, but when it does happen, like, there's really not a lot you can do about it. Take what you can from the game. You know, you probably could have still at least learned something from the game and just, like, move on, pretty much. It's possible to make no mistakes and still lose. So, next up is, what makes playing tanks fun? And so this is obviously not a particularly... you can't really measure this one empirically, right? What makes tanks fun? Basically, this person was just like, yo, playing tank's awful. Why do people like it? I actually like playing tank, and this is very specific to me, really, where I've always enjoyed the feeling of, like, stonewalling the opposition, basically. That's why earlier in this video I got really excited when I was watching that guy block Krillin for like 40 seconds, because I was like, yo, that Krillin player is getting so mad right now. That Krillin is like, dude, let me in. Jesus fuck, let me talk to this boy. Stop shutting me out. I love that kind of feeling. When I play any fighting game, my favorite experience playing that game is just blocking the bad man, because I like to imagine the bad man on the other end is like, fucking let me in, Jesus Christ. I enjoy the feeling of being a solid diamond wall, basically. And that translates over to other games as well, because, like, when the enemy Rhine just, like, whiffs every earth, you block every earth shatter, you countercharge him every time, like, I like to imagine that Rhine getting really mad. And sometimes you can tell he's really mad because he just, like, rage shatters directly into your shield, and that's always very fun for me. I also enjoy just, like, walking at the enemy team and watching them go, oh, Jesus Christ, and slowly backing away because they don't know what to do while you're just kind of walking at them, basically. That's also a very fun feeling for me. And that's why tanking is fun for me, pretty much. It's also, like, pretty easy to win as a tank a lot of the time, to be honest with you, especially, like, if you play Reinhardt, because all you've got to do is outplay the other Reinhardt or their shield tank, if it's not Reinhardt, and you earth shatter half their team and you won the team fight. Good job. You know, and you just do that, like, 3 times, you won the game. So, like, once you get, like, good at tanking, it's generally pretty easy to win. It's just, people who don't really know how to play tank are the ones that bemoan how it is, like, impossible to play tank and climb, basically. Like, they just don't know what they're doing. It's mad easy to climb as tank once you're good at playing tank. But yeah, that's what makes playing tank fun for me. This will obviously vary greatly from person to person. If you enjoy playing tank, I would be very interested to hear why you enjoy playing tank, because I find this kind of question just interesting, why people are drawn to specific roles, you know. You generally get, like, some pretty interesting answers if they play DPS, because there are all kinds of different playstyles for DPS, so you'll generally get pretty varied answers for that, but, you know, it's kind of a question I enjoy hearing the mixed answers for. You generally get a pretty mixed bag. Anyway, so next question, this is the last question for this week, is who do I prioritize using Nano on? So, the thing with Nano Boost is that it's an ultimate that is much better used proactively rather than reactively. So you are generally looking to use it on whoever is most likely to engage your fights, pretty much. So if you have Genji, you can engage with Nano Blade. If you have Reinhardt, he can engage with Earth Shatter. Or if the enemy Reinhardt fucks up, but that one ends up being a bit more nebulous, like Earth Shatter's an easy one. Winston can engage almost any time you want, but don't Nano Boost Winston if he's using Primal Rage. Never Nano a Primal Rage Winston, only Nano a regular Winston. If he decides to use Primal Rage after you Nano Boosted him, not your fault, whatever. But don't Nano Boost him after he uses Primal Rage. Who else? Like Reaper, Mei, these people can be in positions to engage fights as well. Reaper more than Mei. Generally, Nano Boosting Mei isn't particularly huge, but you're looking for the people that'll engage a team fight, pretty much. Those are the most beneficial ones to Nano Boost. Pharah, also, Nano Barrage is pretty scary, you know. You're also looking to boost people who are ulting, as long as they have an ultimate that benefits from it. Not all of them do. Like, Blizzard doesn't benefit from Nano Boost, really, but, like, Nano Blade obviously does. Death Blossom, Tac Visor, Barrage, these ultimates all benefit from Nano Boost. You also like to prefer to Nano Boost people who do consistent damage rather than burst damage. Genji is kind of the exception to this, but when you Nano Boost Genji, it makes him he can now one-shot people significantly easier. So that's why nano boosting Genji is like the exception. He's like burst damage with Nano Blade rather than consistent DPS, but he can now cut dash, it killed a person. And that's big. So he's like the exception, but consistent damage is preferable to burst damage when nano boosting also. So after that, like, there are some times when there's nobody, like, ideal to boost on your team, because you can end up with a team that's like Sigma, Orisa, Junkrat, Mei. You know, none of these people are, like, huge nano boost targets. So you're pretty much just looking for, like, whoever seems like they're in a good position to do damage. So, like, Junkrat can just, like, dump a bunch of damage. Like, you see, like, their shield break, you might just nano boost Junkrat or Orisa just because they do the most consistent DPS output on your team. You might just nano boost somebody to save them. You can do this even if you have, like, a good engage on your team. Like, nano boosting to save somebody is also viable. It's not ideal, like, it gets better used proactively rather than reactively, but sometimes Reinhardt dying right now would be really fucking bad for us. So I'm going to nano boost Reinhardt just to keep him alive, because if he dies right now, we probably lose this team fight anyway, so I'll ult to keep him alive, you know. That was sick. Great job, Vegito. So, you know, try not to ult people to save them, but if you think that person is important enough to be worth saving, don't be afraid to ult somebody to save them as well. But, you know, sometimes you're in those positions where there's no ideal person to nano boost, so just, like, whoever seems like they do... Again, favor people to do consistent DPS, and if they look like they're in a position where they might be able to do a lot of damage, go for it. This is an ultimate that you want to use as early in a team fight as possible as well. Say it proactive rather than reactive. Ideally, you use it to engage, or like as soon as engage happens, rather than like halfway through a team fight. It's never like using nano boost halfway through a team fight. It's not an ultimate that'll win you a team fight by itself, right? Like you need something to work with it. So just like trying to get tempo right at the start of the fight is better than using it like halfway through the fight. Sometimes you only get it halfway through the fight, in which case, you know, it might be worth it just to try and like seal the deal on the team fight, but be careful because it's generally used better early. Unless you can save somebody with it, necessarily, which might be a bigger deal still again. But like those are your priorities. Basically think about like who's going to engage on your team, and then try and go down like the hierarchy of like Genji, Rein, Winston, you know, like Reaper. And then like if there's no great combo, just think, well, who does the most DPS and who is in like a good position. And use it to save somebody if you think that person is important enough, but try and save it to use aggressively rather than defensively. And there you go. So now we'll wait for this game to finish before we move on now. I have very little to say to you currently other than I'm sick, so apologies for the inconsistent uploads the last week or so. Being sick will do that to you. Yeah, Dragon Ball Fighter sure is a sick game, though. You know. Well, what can we talk about? Yakuza 7 looks sick. There was a trailer they released not that long ago, December 26th, I think it was they released. That was a pretty sick trailer. It showed it showed things like Majima's going to be a summon, and he throws a lot of daggers. You know, what a weird series that suddenly 7 mainline games in, they're like, hey, by the way, we're gonna be a turn-based RPG now. But I mean, the protagonist in canon really likes Dragon Quest, so whatever, I guess it makes sense. Yakuza's sick, dude. What a sick video game series. Highly look forward to Yakuza 7. Still have to play all the other Yakuza games still, as well as the Fist of the North Star game, but, you know. Yeah, please let me just, like, pause, eject now, thank you. You're only allowed to actually, like, stop things at very specific points. So it looks, 21 looks very indignant about what's about to happen, and Vegito is partway through his standing heavy animation, so we'll assume Vegito won the fight, so good job me. I'm playing Vegito well. So thank you very much for watching if you did, and I'm sick, so we end the spiel early. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Hooray. Bye. I sleep.